The lights dimmed in the PR control room and every monitor flickered to life. On screen, Mary, his wife, stood center stage in a pale champagne gown, camera ready as always. Her hand was laced tightly with George's, the same George she'd introduced years ago as just a little brother from the neighborhood. David didn't blink. Tonight's finale, Mary's voice trembled with perfectly placed emotion, isn't just the end of a show, it's the beginning of a new chapter. For years, I was afraid to admit what I truly felt, but George, you protected me through everything. You believed in me before the world did. The audience in the studio gasped, cooed, cheered. George brought her hand to his lips. Then let the world finally know, Mary, you're mine. Confetti exploded as the camera caught them kissing, soft, delicate, painfully timed. Behind 10 feet of shatterproof glass, David remained still, legs crossed, a silent finger tapping on the armrest of his director's chair. His assistant stood frozen nearby, clutching a clipboard like a shield. Run the trending tag cue, David said. His voice was calm, almost bored. Yes, sir. On the large projection wall, hashtags lined up in real time. George Mary, forever. Hashtag reality romance. Finale, hashtag childhood, sweetheart, true love. David gave a small nod. Add one more. The assistant hesitated. Which one? David stood, walked to the console, and typed it himself. Mary Han is married. Seconds later, the tag shot up like fire licking dry leaves. Studio feeds rippled. Panic spread across the adjacent editing bays. PR team phones started ringing. Confusion, chaos, but David was already walking out. He passed by a poster of the show, Mary's flawless smile framed under golden lights, George beside her with stage sincerity. The image stared at him like a dare. 12 years of marriage, and tonight, on their anniversary, Mary had chosen to confess her love for another man on national television. No mention of David, no trace, no ring on her finger. He slipped his left hand into his coat pocket. The pure silver band still clung to his skin, its edges worn smooth from habit. His assistant jogged to keep up. Sir, should we stop the broadcast, file a cease and desist? David's lips curled faintly. Stop it? He reached the elevator, pressed the button. Why stop what's finally revealing the truth? The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside. Before the doors closed, he added without turning his head. Push the press release in 6 minutes, headline it. Fleet of Dreams Entertainment confirms lead actress Mary Han is legally married to CEO David Han. His assistant swallowed. And George? David's eyes narrowed. Terminate his contract, demand full compensation, pull every sponsorship, drop his endorsements. Tonight, the sweetheart becomes the scandal. The elevator doors closed, and somewhere down below, a nation was still cheering for a lie. David Han's name rarely appeared in headlines. At faculty meetings, he was simply Mr. Han, the quiet, punctual history teacher who kept his head down and avoided gossip in the staff room. Students liked him well enough. He brought snacks on exam days, told dry jokes, and never raised his voice. Parents assumed he lived alone, some even pitied him. A man that still wore a wedding band, but whose wife was never seen. Only a few knew he was married to Mary Han. Correction, the Mary Han. Top-billed actress. Nation sweetheart. Face of 4 major luxury brands. And current star of the viral dating reality show, Love. The rest didn't need to know. David preferred it that way. He drove an old Honda Accord, wore button-down shirts from discount racks, lived in a quiet apartment block in the old city district. His colleagues never questioned it. A modest man with a modest life, a teacher's salary didn't go far, after all. His father-in-law, Professor Han, reminded him of that fact every holiday dinner. Mary could have married into wealth, the old man would say, swirling expensive wine. Instead, she chose passion, a man with principles, who writes books about dead kings. The laugh always followed, polite, icy. David never replied. But if someone had traced the IP address of One Leaf on a Boat, the anonymous screenwriter behind a dozen of the decade's highest-grossing romantic dramas, they might have seen a different picture. If they had looked into the holding company behind Fleet of Dreams Entertainment, the production powerhouse behind Love, they might have seen his name, faintly etched beneath layers of shell corporations. And if they had ever checked who funded the boutique agency that signed Mary Hahn fresh out of college, well. But David never needed recognition, he never needed cameras, he only ever needed her. They'd met in their final year of high school. He was already 80 working part-time at a local bookstore. She walked in looking for a copy of Romeo and Juliet, clutching a scribbled reading list and asking if Montague was the author or the character. She was clumsy, radiant, slightly vain, and terrifyingly ambitious. He fell in love in 17 seconds. She loved being adored, and he adored her completely. Through college, he paid their rent, picked up tutoring jobs, and wrote scripts in secret, building fictional worlds while she rehearsed lines in dorm mirrors. When her face started trending on student social media forums, she was offered a background role in a web series. She panicked the night before the audition. "I'm not good enough," she whispered, tears rolling down her cheek. David stayed up all night writing a 5-minute original monologue just for her. She landed the role, then the next, then the lead. And never once asked where the money came from when their agency upgraded to private rehearsal studios, when her first luxury bag showed up, from a sponsor, when she moved from renting to owning. It was easier to believe the world owed her success. David never corrected her, not when her mother whispered that she could have married George, the safe bet, the golden boy neighbor studying abroad. Not when tabloids called her a self-made icon, not when her stylist told her to ditch the husband narrative for better brand deals. Instead, he worked quietly behind the scenes, sending anonymous emails to producers, buying ad slots, funding entire drama campaigns just to push her name into the algorithm. And when his script started winning awards, he clapped from the back of the auditorium. He didn't need her to say thank you, he just needed her to be happy. Until the smiles stopped reaching her eyes when he came home, until the texts became fewer, the excuses longer. Until George came back, Mary introduced him like a harmless shadow from the past. "He's just George, you know, from across the street. He's been through a lot, David, don't be jealous." David wasn't, not at first. He saw the signs, but didn't react. Because when a man like David reacts, he makes sure it's the last time he has to. When George's name started popping up in casting rooms, David was the one who secured him a vocal coach. He made the introductions, signed him to Fleet of Dreams, handed him 2 variety show pilots on a silver platter. Because if he was going to bury a snake, he wanted it to grow fat first. Mary's affection didn't vanish overnight, it rotted slowly. She stopped coming home after shoots, claimed she was sleeping over in brand houses to maintain her image, blocked David's number whenever tabloid rumors about her and George surfaced, and David still didn't fight because he was too busy pulling strings in silence. By the time she kissed George on live television, David had already moved half the company shares to his father's name. Had already bought out George's contract termination clause, had already hired 4 private investigators, 3 surveillance teams, and 2 AI-enhanced forensic editors. Mary thought he was a high school teacher scraping together lesson plans on a broken printer. She thought he was harmless, disposable, replaceable. But David Hahn had been quietly scripting this story for months. And now? The final act had begun. The spot was meant for David. Love, the country's hottest dating show, had just opened its first season to married celebrity couples. It was the perfect PR opportunity. A surprise finale appearance to reveal that Mary Hahn, queen of single actress branding, was secretly married all along. A power move. One that David had spent months orchestrating behind the scenes, aligning production with their anniversary. Only one form remained to sign, Mary's. Instead, George appeared on the teaser poster. Handsome, telegenic, shirt open just enough. And standing beside him, radiant under golden filters, was Mary, her eyes smiling as if she had never loved another man. David stared at the tablet in silence, his assistant hovered beside him, visibly sweating. "She switched the registration last minute," the assistant said, "submitted an edited guest list, and the studio director didn't question it, because George fits the storyline better." David's fingers remained still on the tablet. "She said you wouldn't mind." He looked up slowly. "Play me the trailer." The trailer began, fireworks, slow-motion laughter, Mary gazing at George while curled on a swing. A soft voiceover. "Sometimes, the one meant for you was always beside you." The tagline appeared next, from childhood friends to lovers. David said nothing. His assistant hesitated. Should I? David's phone buzzed, a message from Mary. Mary. David, don't overthink, it's just scripted, you know how this works, George is like a brother to me, it's all showbiz, thank you for handling things with my mom, my dad's still in the lab, and I might be at the show's celebration party late tonight. Don't wait up. A second later, the chat screen dimmed, the typing bar disappeared, blocked. David let out a quiet exhale, not quite a sigh, not quite a laugh. He tapped on her contact, dialed, blocked. He tried a second number, blocked. The assai. Stant watched nervously. Sir, we have other lines, burner accounts if needed. It's fine. David stood and slipped his phone into his coat pocket. We'll go to the hospital now. The elevator ride was silent. When they arrived, the hallway was lined with faint antiseptic smell. Outside the emergency wing, the attending doctor approached with urgency. Mr. Hahn, the patient's critical, we need a family signature. David looked at the clipboard. Her daughter isn't answering. You're the husband. I'm not a direct relative. You'll need video proof that you tried reaching her, or you'll be blamed later for bypassing consent. The doctor glanced down the hallway, anxious. She's an actress, right? The one on TV? David nodded. She said you're her husband, the doctor said cautiously. So, will you sign or not? David took the clipboard, signed his name cleanly, and passed it back. Make sure the attempt to reach her is recorded. I'll handle the rest. He stepped aside, placed a hand on the caretaker's shoulder. Stay with her. Update me if anything changes. Yes, sir. David turned and walked out of the hospital, the emergency room lights glowing behind him like dying stars. Back in the car, the assistant kept glancing at him through the rearview mirror. She's blocked all lines, again, it's the third time this year. David looked out the window, unmoving. She'll spin it as method acting, or say George is just a screen partner. Revoke George's contract, David said. The assistant gripped the wheel tighter. Understood. Pull his endorsement portfolio, demand immediate compensation on breach of terms. Yes, sir. Pause all project approvals connected to Mary Hahn, freeze marketing budgets tied to her image. What about her parents' medical research funding? Pull it. The assistant glanced at him in the mirror. That'll tank the lab's operations. David's expression didn't change. I don't fund betrayals. They drove in silence until they reached the company tower. The sky had turned a pale bruised gray, sunset bleeding into storm clouds. David stepped into the executive wing and walked directly to the war room, an isolated PR command center designed for emergency scandals. On the digital board, his assistant began displaying prepared assets, timestamps, trending data, archived paparazzi footage, video stills from hotel lobbies. Each file a brick in the case. David's gaze paused at a folder labeled Surveillance Footage, Incident, Hahn Residence. The assistant caught his glance. Should I initiate leak prep? Schedule it, not now. His phone buzzed again, a production assistant from Love trying to reach out. He silenced the call. A press briefing team entered the room. Mr. Hahn, if we move now, we can get ahead of the media cycle by morning. Do you want a hard drop or controlled release? Push both. Let public outrage light the fire, then let legal fan the flames. Copy that. His assistant watched everything unfold with a mixture of dread and awe. Sir? David didn't look up. Are we really doing this now? David finally lifted his eyes, gaze hard and unshakable. No more waiting. He walked to the glass wall overlooking the city, the tower lights of Fleet of Dreams glowing behind him like a throne. It starts today. The control room was nearly dark now, just the glow of monitors on David's face. He sat in the same chair, one hand resting on the console, the other curled loosely around the armrest. The live feed from Love filled the main screen. He had muted the audio, but the images were louder than any sound. Mary's head tilted toward George. Her fingers traced the lapel of his suit, her smile unfolding like a practiced flower. In slow motion, she whispered something to him and then pressed her lips to his, a kiss perfectly framed for the cameras. The audience in the studio erupted into applause. Confetti drifted across the stage like mocking snow. On another screen beside it, the hospital's ICU monitor flashed green and red. A heart rate beeped steadily, the numbers fragile and unchanging. His mother-in-law's life suspended between digital signals, waiting for a daughter who wouldn't pick up the phone. David's eyes flicked from Mary's kiss to the heart monitor and back again. He felt his own heartbeat, but only as a dull pressure in his ribs, like someone knocking from far away. He remembered the first time Mary had signed a contract with her agent. They were still in college, sitting in a cramped cafe with peeling wallpaper. She'd been so nervous she could barely hold the pen. Her hand trembled as she looked at him. "What if this ruins my life?" she had asked, eyes shining with both fear and hunger. "Then I'll rewrite it for you," David had said, and meant it. He'd paid the initial retainer fee under an alias so she wouldn't be embarrassed. He'd ghostwritten a pilot for a small web drama and slipped it to a producer. He'd stayed up nights revising scripts she didn't even know existed, weaving characters she could embody, scenes that would make her a star. When her first drama became a modest hit, she believed it was luck. When she won her first award, she thought it was fate. He never asked about the calls he made, the favors he bartered, the scripts he sold under pseudonyms to funnel money into her path. He'd even bought properties in her name, 2 apartments and a shopfront, explaining it away as family support from his parents. He'd made sure she was never seen arriving at auditions in his old car, always sending a private driver instead. And then the day she told him she was pregnant. He had been exhausted from teaching and script revisions, but when she placed his hand on her flat stomach, he'd felt a warmth spread through him like dawn. He'd gone out that same night, drawn blueprints for a nursery, hired a designer to renovate the villa's west wing. He'd imagined a crib by the window, soft yellow curtains, a life anchored by something pure. A week later, she texted him between takes. "I terminated the pregnancy. Career can't slow down now. Don't be upset. We'll try again later." He had sat in his car for an hour, staring at the message. No anger, just a hollow that wouldn't close. Now, on the split screens before him, that hollow opened again. Mary kissing George. ICU monitors beeping. She had used his money to send George abroad for special training. He'd even booked George's flight himself, arranged accommodations, lined up mentors. He remembered George shaking his hand at the airport, eyes gleaming. "You're like an older brother to me," George had said. "I won't forget this." David wondered if George had whispered the same thing to Mary before kissing her on stage. He pressed a button and rewound the live feed 5 seconds. Mary's lips on George's. Confetti in the air. The upward curve of her smile, unmistakable, unhidden. There was no yelling in him, no smashing screens, no tearing papers, only silence, heavy and deliberate, like snow burying a city overnight. His assistant stepped into the room, hesitant. "Sir, we've prepped the legal drafts. The PR strike package is ready whenever you give the signal." David didn't answer. He was remembering the night Mary first walked onto a red carpet. She had borrowed a simple dress, nothing compared to the gowns she wore now. When the flashbulbs went off, she'd reached back for his hand. For 1 second, she'd looked like the girl in the bookstore again, eager and unsure. He'd squeezed her fingers and whispered, "You're going to make it." And she had. But in the end, she had taken all he'd built and given it to someone else. David leaned forward, typed a short command on the console. A new window opened. Surveillance footage, Han residence. He dragged the file to an outgoing message addressed to his assistant's secure channel. On the preview, his mother-in-law stood at the top of the stairs, pointing a finger at George, her voice raised though the audio was faint. George, jaw tight, shoved past her. She lost her footing, tumbled, hit the marble floor. Motionless. The footage ended with George pulling out his phone, dialing, hanging up, then running without calling for help. David clicked send. The file uploaded, a green bar blinked once, then disappeared. The assistant's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, eyes widening. "Sir, is this what I think it is?" David stood, buttoning his jacket. His reflection in the dark glass was calm, distant. "Yes." He turned from the monitors, Mary's kiss frozen mid-frame, and walked toward the door. The trending list cracked in half within 2 hours of the footage going public. George pushed her, #at Mary. Han cheating, #Fleet of Dreams CEO is her husband, #George exposed. The hashtags bled into every platform. A scandal that was supposed to be entertainment's hottest on-screen love story, now twisted into a cinematic betrayal arc, and David hadn't said a word publicly yet. Mary's fans fractured. Some refused to believe it. Others turned their banners into bonfires. George's label sponsors began pulling deals before the ink dried. Then Mary went live. The live stream pinged across millions of phones. She sat in a softly lit room, curled on a cream couch, wrapped in a pale pink shawl that softened her image. Makeup was minimal, just enough to look exhausted, but still beautiful. Her voice shook as she looked into the camera. "I never wanted to do this publicly," she began, "but lies are being spread, and I have to speak up." Behind her, a photo frame came into view. A candid picture, Mary and George laughing, her head resting on his shoulder. A subtle wedding ring sparkled on her hand. "My mother is dying," she whispered, eyes shimmering. "She has late-stage Alzheimer's. She doesn't even remember who I married. She's confused. That man, David Hahn, was someone I knew years ago, but we never actually had a real marriage. It was an old promise I tried to honor for my parents' sake, but I never loved him. I tried to end it quietly, but he..." She sniffled. "He faked documents, leaked doctored footage. He's obsessed. He's trying to ruin me and George because he can't accept that I've moved on." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I'm sorry for misleading everyone. I was scared. I didn't know how to let go of the past without hurting someone. But I have to live my truth. I want to be with George." The screen went black. Silence, then fire. Sympathy flooded in from her most loyal. The internet flipped. Mary's narrative cracked open like an egg dropped on pavement. Fans started questioning everything. Why were there no wedding photos? Why would someone fake not being married? How could she weaponize her mother's condition? And right on cue, George couldn't help himself. He went live within an hour. No lighting, just a messy desk and his temper. "David Hahn is a stalker fan. He photoshopped the marriage certificate. He's insane. He's just some loser who taught high school and got lucky. Mary's mine, always has been. We're soulmates. She was never his wife. It was fake, all of it, fake." David was in the boardroom when the notification came. He played the clip once, then again, then smiled. His assistant looked pale. "He said you faked government papers. Should we?" David stood. "Send them the originals." "Just to clarify, who?" David turned to him slowly. "The Ministry of Civil Affairs, the Tax Bureau, the network, every brand that endorsed Mary, and..." He paused. "The courts." He walked out of the room, each step echoing louder than George's tantrum. The conference room on the 58th floor of Fleet of Dreams headquarters had been soundproofed for legal arbitration. But today, it hosted no negotiation, only reckoning. Mary arrived first, flanked by two bodyguards in black suits and sunglasses, her chin tilted, her expression composed in a way only actresses could manage under pressure. George followed behind her, casual in designer streetwear, chewing gum like he had something to celebrate. David was already there, seated at the head of the long obsidian glass table. He wore a black suit without a tie, sleeves rolled neatly, wedding ring absent. 3 of his own security personnel stood at opposite ends of the room, silent, watchful, and trained to move before emotion could. Mary didn't sit. "David," she said, her voice cool, eyes scanning for weakness. "Let's skip the dramatics. We're here because you want closure, and I want my life back, so let's handle this like adults." George pulled out a chair with a smirk. "He's probably still hoping you'll change your mind. Poor guy." David didn't flinch. "Sit." They did. He slid a folder across the table, thick, leather-bound, clasped shut. "This is the full divorce settlement," he said quietly. "I keep 80% of all jointly held assets. You keep the rest." Mary's nostrils flared. 80%? Of my money? You must have hit your head." "You mean the properties I bought under your name?" David asked. "The villa you remodeled with funds from my shell accounts? The brand deals your agency landed because I ghost-wrote your award-winning script?" "You were a history teacher," she snapped. David looked amused. "And yet every time your star dimmed, you rose again, like clockwork. Think that was luck?" George scoffed. "This is extortion. We came here to negotiate, not bow down to some obsessed freak." David turned to his assistant, who rolled a trolley forward and unlocked a May 8 black case. Inside were 4 hard drives, color-coded and labeled. "Let me walk you through it," David said. "Drive 1, high-resolution security footage from your live stream apartment. dated and timestamped cohabitation for 6 months. Not your marital home, Mary, which means adultery. Mary's jaw tensed. Drive 2, David continued. Private investigator photos of you and George at a hotel 3 weeks ago. Footage includes George's assistant purchasing contraceptives. These coincide with the dates you claimed you were at a wellness retreat. He tapped the third drive. All transactions, bank logs showing you funneled sponsorship money into George's personal account. George shifted uncomfortably in his seat. That's not illegal. She gave me gifts. So what? David finally looked at him. It is when the money belonged to our joint holdings. You spent it on a Maserati, 2 studio apartments, and a stockpile of crypto that just tanked. George stopped chewing. And the fourth drive, David said, voice softening, is the hospital call, the one you tried to edit for your live stream. It proves you ignored your mother's condition until the cameras were rolling. Mary stood suddenly. I'm not signing that damn paper. This is character assassination, not divorce. David remained seated. No, this is exposure. You built your fame on the lie of being single. You sold dreams. I'm just showing them who they bought. You've always been this pathetic? George snapped. Using evidence like a coward? You're not a man, you're a spreadsheet with feelings. David smiled, and yet here you are, sweating over a spreadsheet. Mary turned toward him, voice trembling with fury. You're obsessed with destroying me. For what? Because I moved on? Because I didn't love you enough? You didn't have to love me, David said, eyes like ice. You just had to be honest. She stepped closer, hands clenched. I'll say it publicly. I'll deny the marriage. I'll call you a stalker in front of cameras. I'll burn everything down before I give you my career. David turned to the wall behind him. A monitor flickered on. Footage played. Mary curled against George on a couch, whispering in his ear. Once this cools off, I'll file for full asset division. He's too soft to fight back. I'll keep everything. Just smile and act scared. The camera panned slightly, revealing a hidden lens buried in the bookshelf. Mary's face went white. I own the walls in that apartment, David said simply. Did you forget I paid for it? George stood up, fists clenched. You recorded us? That's invasion of privacy. Is it still invasion? David asked, when you're cheating in the house I bought, using utilities I pay for, with a woman who's still legally my wife? Mary's voice dropped to a hiss. This is low, David. No, he said. This is truth. Mary glanced at her assistant. Give me his phone. David calmly slid it across the table. She unlocked it, brows furrowed, fingers racing across the screen. She opened the local folder app. Where's the footage stored? Go on, David said. Delete it. She did. Every video, every photo, every document, one by one. She even went to recently deleted and cleared that too. Then she stepped back, victorious. Now what? You going to cry about your precious evidence? David raised his eyes to the monitor. A new window opened. Live backup feed, cloud synchronicity enabled. Every file she had just erased reappeared, automatically uploaded, stored, verified, and legally timestamped. Mary stumbled back a step. You? David stood. I learned a long time ago, he said, voice quiet, never to trust something that only exists in one place. George looked to the bodyguards, panicked. Let's go. You'll stay, David said. The legal team is on their way. If you leave, this becomes criminal obstruction. Mary's composure crumbled, and for the first time, her voice shook not with rage, but with desperation. I'll give you 30%. David stepped around the table, walking toward her slowly. You think this is about money? She stared at him, breath uneven. He stopped, just inches away. That child you aborted, he whispered. Was it even mine? The room froze. George blinked, Mary's lips parted, but no sound came out. David didn't need the answer. He turned to the door. Meeting's over. The lock clicked behind him. The ink on the divorce certificate had dried 2 weeks ago. David didn't throw a party, he didn't even take the day off. He simply signed the final documents, watched the funds hit his account, $300 million in assets, liquid and real, and then moved on to review next quarter's production budget. Fleet of Dreams Entertainment carried on. Ratings soared. A new actress replaced Mary on the upcoming drama roster. Headlines shifted focus to fresher scandals, newer stars. But Mary didn't vanish. She refused. At first, she tried to live stream her healing journey. Alone in a soft-lit room, she addressed the camera in whispered tones. I was manipulated, I was naive, I trusted the wrong people. She cried, she quoted love letters David never wrote, she hinted at suicide, she called herself a phoenix. But the internet had already heard the audio files, seen the surveillance footage, watched her insult her coma-stricken mother. Her attempts at reinvention fell flat. Then Joel, still bitter and toxic, dropped the final match. He went live from a hotel room, bare walls, fluorescent lighting, his face puffy with rage. Mary's acting like she was a victim, he shouted. Please, she seduced me when I was 18, she cheated on David during their first year of marriage, lied to her fans, lied to everyone, even that abortion, she didn't even know who the father was. His words struck like lightning. In 1 hour, Mary lost her last sponsor, her influencer accounts were suspended, netizens tore apart her posts, reposting the clip of her mocking David with Joel, he'll never fight back, he's too boring. 3 days later, she showed up at David's school. It was just past lunch period. The courtyard was filled with students, laughing and moving between classes. And then Mary arrived, face bare, clothes wrinkled, heels scraping against the concrete like she hadn't slept in days. "Da. You never stood a chance." Joel stopped talking. The officers dragged him out, limp and shaking. David turned back to his car, slid into the driver's seat of his black Pagani Huayra, and shut the door with a calm click. The interior was silent, the city lights danced along the windshield. He reached for his phone, opened his contacts, scrolled to Mary, then held it for a moment. 12 years of history in a single name. He tapped delete contact. The screen asked, "Are you sure?" He tapped yes. And as the sun dipped low behind the skyline, casting gold over glass and steel, David drove off without looking back.